I'm Sophia Marie, obviously, and you're watching my YouTube channel, and today I'm going to be talking about something a little bit different than I usually do. And so, as some of you guys might know, I am a English secondary education major in college, so basically I'm studying how to teach. It's always weird when you say it like that. But one of the assignments this semester has been to kind of think about how we teach writing specifically, and how, like, what do we do and why do we do that, and if like our ideas are backed by anything, or if we're just like, oh yeah, we want to do something. So this is how I teach. Well, basically I narrowed that assignment down slightly to talk about more like 3 different distinctions or 3 different things that I want to remind my students, my future students, that like about writing, so that they get a bigger, grander picture of the writing world and where they fit into it. Because oftentimes I think what happens is that we get into this little small, like, oh, I think writing means this, and then we don't associate ourselves with that. So basically we just say, okay, I guess I'm not a writer, I guess I'm not good at this, I guess I'm just not gonna do anything. But we're not gonna do that, hopefully. And so the 3 distinctions that I want to make, the first one is the different definitions of writing. Because sometimes when people talk about writing, we talk about like pen to paper. I'm literally like taking things and writing things down. And other times we're talking about, you know, the more sophisticated idea of like, I'm getting my point across, I am going to argue for this or that, I'm going to explain this or that, I'm going to do this, that, etc. So I did an interview with a student, and I did a self-interview, so it was the same interview, and we just kind of looked at the differences between the 2. And both of us, when asked like how we started writing, mentioned both the more sophisticated one, but also the just plain out, how did we learn how to write letters one. And I said that like my mom taught me, she said that her teacher taught her, and I think it's cool that both of us made the distinction between the 2, but I think what often happens is that we fixate on one, that we totally forget about the more sophisticated aspects of it, and we're just like, okay, this is like, we know how to write, why are we learning how to write if we already knew how to write in like 6 years old. And other times we focus solely on the like, oh, I need to get my point across, and like kind of undermine the difficulties that people have who can't write well, who are just illiterate, or who have dyslexia, or who just have difficulties at, like, getting what they want said onto paper. I think basically focusing on either one of those sides exclusively kind of makes for like a one-sided, very narrow like understanding of what writing really is, because writing incorporates all sorts of things. That's why like we learn cursive writing, we used to learn cursive writing. That's why like calligraphy is still a really cool thing. That's why like argumentative writing is amazing. It's like, because there's so many different types and different ways to do so, and we need to differentiate that in class, because even though we might ourselves only be thinking about one in terms of like, oh, this semester we're going to be focusing on this, at the same time we kind of have to remember that the students are establishing their definition of writing based on what we're doing. So if we show that there's different aspects to it, then we can basically just show them that the world is a lot bigger than they think. A lot bigger than we think, honestly. And then the second thing is very similar, honestly. We're talking about like different purposes of writing, because I feel like a lot of times in the classroom, we focus either on specific things. So maybe it's argumentative for like a really long time, or if we just fixate on poetry for a while. It's interesting talking with the student. She mentioned that she really liked scientific writing. Scientific writing, just more objective, this is the facts kind of writing. And I'm like, I really like fiction, and I like noticing the different fun stuff in fiction, and noticing just fiction is fun. And I think that as long as just my belief in general that we need to focus on more than just one side of aspects, like, all the time, it just really, like, leads to my claim that basically I should discuss with my students the different aspects of writing. I should mention that there are poems, that there's creative poems, there's, like, poems, fiction, etc., etc., argumentative writing, scientific writing, but there's also other forms like script writing, which I made lesson plans on this semester, just about writing scripts, because that, even though it ends up as a visual product, you have to write this down, and sometimes we forget that, and we often like say, okay, I'm not a good writer, I'm not going to do this, because because I'm not good at this specific thing. I'm not good at writing narrative fiction. That means I'll never write something else, which is not the best way to think about writing, and also kind of makes for, like, it basically stifles students' ability to associate their identity with writing, because to be honest, they'll probably write at some point in their lives, whatever it is, and being able to be confident in that is actually pretty cool. And then the last claim that I have is talking about the time-consuming nature of writing with the students, because often I feel like what happens is that we talk about writing in this either school, talk about it in school, and we're like, you need to do this because you need to do this. Talk about this at home, and we're like, yeah, you'll have time to do this, or like, you know, if you enjoy writing, you'll write at home. But I think what we forget to mention to students is that writing is ridiculously time-consuming. It takes up a lot of time. And whatever it is, if it's for school, it takes up a lot of time. If it's for yourself, it takes up a lot of time. I think what happens is in our minds we say, okay, we're not going to mention this because if the students actually want to write, they will find a way to write. They will find times of the day. But sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can't. Like, especially high school students, you have them doing so many clubs and activities, sports and theater, and like working part-time, working full-time, like all those other things in addition to school, in addition to family, in addition to friends. And we forget to mention to people that it's okay to have periods of times in their life where they can't find time to write. Especially like now during finals week, for example, we probably most likely people who don't, a lot of people who even like really like writing and really enjoy it and find this is the way to express themselves often still do not have time to write during this period like of the semester. And I feel like if we don't mention this out front, one, we'll kind of shorthanding them in general, but also we're just taking away their identity in terms of like, not taking away their identity completely, but basically it's harder for them to come back after those like deserts of like not writing if they're like, okay, I haven't written in a month. Am I still a writer? Am I still good at this? Are my ideas still worth it? And if you help them realize that this is just honestly a part of their identity, one, and not their whole identity, two, that it is okay that they took a break, that breaks are a natural part of life, that that if family events came up, that is important, that friends, that like those are important, like there's times and things that they won't be able to write, but that's still okay, and they can still call themselves a writer, and it's not, it doesn't disqualify them from being a writer. It also helps them realize the importance of the revision process, because oftentimes what happens with revision is we kind of like are already done, like our minds are like completely done and bored with the assignment by the time we get to the revision, or like my time, like in my experience at least, or like in terms of like you finished and you're like, okay, I'm done, and then you're like, oh no, wait, I'm not, I need to revise things. I feel like a lot of students also feel this kind of like idea of like, okay, I finished, I got everything I want on paper, I don't want to revise things. And if we do not mention at all the time-consuming nature of writing as we start out the semester, as we talk about things in the beginning, as we talk about different issues in writing, revising can be very difficult when you see how long it takes you to make all the revisions. It oftentimes doesn't seem worth it. But like if we mention that all writing is time consuming and revising is time consuming, but still definitely worth it in terms of quality of the stuff coming out, that is actually really encouraging. So those are the three things that I think are very important to mention to students when you're teaching writing. So first, wow, I'm blanking. First one is like the definitions of writing and what different people mean, and how what different people mean when they talk about writing, and what we should think of as when we talk about writing, not just one little aspect of it, but also the entirety. In terms of genres or like ways to write or ways to express thinking and feeling, it's also important just in terms of like mentioning that YouTube videos that are scripted and then talked about are just as much a form of writing as, you know, taking a pen and writing a first draft on paper and then revising it and then making an essay. And then the third thing is just mentioning to students that writing is time consuming and that it will always be time consuming, that for every bit of like amazingness that they come up with, they have to stay up for a while and focus on the quality of the material coming out. So yeah, I believe that those differentiating those in class will help students have a grander picture of the writing world in general, and their sort of place in it, their ability to be a writer, even if they're not what most high schools think, like, oh, this is what you think of in terms of writing. They have a place in the writing world. Almost everybody, if not everybody, does, and there is important, like, it is important for students to realize that that is cool, and that they are writers, and that there's no, oh, I'm just not good at writing, is not a way to, like, that's just not true, first of all, and just not an effective way of thinking about the whole process. So yeah, hopefully that was sort of interesting. At least I enjoyed talking about this. I also just enjoyed making YouTube videos finally again. And it's nice to combine, you know, school and fun. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. See you guys in the next video.